Last segment here on the multiple source approach to theology is that we've looked at, say, the official, official authorities and sources, like, the Bible plus the magisterium, great teachers plus tradition, okay? But in the end, the great teacher wins because they're the final interpreter of it, okay? Even though supposedly they're equal in authority. We looked at the concept of natural theology and general revelation versus special revelation. And again, there's a proper way to do that, but often natural theology can become magisterial. It should always be subordinate to Scripture. In fact, that's one of the discussions during the Reformation was that, do you have a too much philosophy in your theology that's governing it? And you can also have too little. See, the fact is that you can also get rid of all the use of philosophy as an instrument that our forefathers and mothers have used in formulating doctrine. In fact, we have really good language, for example, to take the biblical data and, for example, explain the Trinity as one essence and three modes of subsistence, things like that. Those aren't biblical terms. That's philosophical knowledge used as an instrumentality or handmade that can help us explain the data or the facts of Scripture. So it's neither magisterial, excessive in magisterial use, nor is it should be a deficient use, because then you lack clarity of explanation. It should always be handmaiden, instrumental, and again, that's when we have seen the great eras of the church, like when we are the Protestant scholastic era, the post-Reformation era, and the Reformation era. That's when we see these great times. Then eventually something becomes magisterial over Scripture, and it goes bad again, and we have to start over. But the last thing here that we're going to look at is, I said, the addition of supposedly new Scripture. Okay? I mentioned that in talking about Roman Catholicism in the sense that, look, they officially added a second canon, right? Those deuterocanonical books, which provide, a basis, foundation, or, authoritative, inspired justification for things like purgatory and praying to the saints and, mainly asking the saints to pray for you. We'd be specific about that. So, but again, all of that is adopted. We see at the Council of Trent addressing, which was the Roman Catholic Council that addressed these new heretic Reformation people, Protestants. So all that, some other time, but that's the context for it. But so that's one way that new Scripture is done. And then we have, again, those that are just clearly cultic, like Christian Science, Mormonism, and so forth. They add books that end up being new that are the final authority. So for example, and here it's explicitly adding new Scripture. So Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of Christian Science back in the late 19th century, wrote her work, Science and Health with Key to the Scripture. Interpreting the Bible in a proper Gnostic metaphysical manner, not metaphysical as in ontology and so forth. They're using the term metaphysical as a type of Gnosticism. So there we end up with Jesus was just a man that had more of the Christ principle than anyone else. Something like that. But her book now is it's the final authority on everything in Christian Science. It's the new Scripture. So that's how you can get, how do you get something called Christian Science that's neither Christian nor science, right? You get someone with pretty much zero training and education making it up as they go, but usually they have some kind of eloquence so they can get a following, okay? So that's why when we study cults, we'll look at the fact that, why is it that cult leaders, at least for founding cults, are charismatic leaders? And the answer is pretty clear, because boring people can't get a following, okay? That's why. So all that to say is that, at some points, either their eloquence, their charisma or something, but here's the new book. Okay, that's old light, this is new light. Now with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, aka Mormonism, there's one where again, explicitly we have new Scripture added. Now according to the LDS Church, Latter-day Saints, which again, when I say that, You got to remember there are about 120 official Mormon denominations in the United States. The biggest one, and the one we think about when we say Mormon, is the one headquartered in Salt Lake City, Utah, that claims now about 15 million members, has about 60,000 active missionaries worldwide. These are the ones who teach there are many gods. These gods are evolved human beings. They have their bodies of flesh and bone. They live on their own planets and so on and so forth. And if you're good enough, you're smart enough, you work hard enough, you can become a god too. So that's the idea here. Now, how do you get that, especially with the LDS Church saying they are the one true restored Church of Jesus Christ on earth? Okay. In fact, the entire first vision from Joseph Smith, but he was going into what's now called the Sacred Grove in Mormonism in upstate New York. So there was a revival going on. He didn't know which church to join. So he prays and, he says, really, which should I join? Lord, is the Presbyterians, the Methodists, and supposedly God the Father, Jesus Christ, and the revelation kept changing over time. But God the Father, Jesus Christ, myriads of angels, and I think at some point SpongeBob SquarePants and everybody was added in there. But the fact is that supposedly God appeared to him and said, don't join any of them. They're all wrong. All their creeds are an abomination, and all the professors are all corrupt. Every branch of Christendom, Catholic, Protestant, Eastern Orthodox, and every part of it, they're all wrong, all in their essential doctrine, and that's why we needed a prophet of the restoration in Joseph Smith. So we ended up with lip service. We believe the Bible insofar as it's correctly translated, but it's been so corrupted, we can't even know if one verse has escaped corruption. So what you have to do is add all of these new scriptures, okay, to their canon of Scripture. So now we have the Book of Mormon. Okay, we have their Doctrine and Covenants. Okay, the Book of Mormon is allegedly the tale of some Jews that came to America in 600 BC, set up a great Jewish civilization here. And then supposedly Christ visited this Jewish civilization. After he was done in Jerusalem, he appeared in America, set up his church here, so on and so forth, until they got killed off about 400 AD. And these Jews who somehow started writing and speaking in Reformed Egyptian hieroglyphs, wrote their story in Reformed Egyptian hieroglyphs on gold plates and buried it in the hill Cumorah. And there it stayed until the angel Moroni showed Joseph Smith where to find the plates. So right there in upstate New York. So all that to say is, again, this is why we needed new books. We have this story of the Book of Mormon. We have the new, quote, epistles in the Doctrine and Covenants. That's a series of about 135 or 36 new revelations that were given to Joseph Smith for governing the church and Christian life. And then they added this Pearl of Great Price, which was this new Book of Abraham and Book of Moses and some of these other things. So how do you get a group that claims to be the one true Christian church on earth, but they're polytheist? Explicitly. Yeah, of course. We can't count the number of gods, and they're gods who were human beings. They have bodies of flesh and bones, and they evolved into being gods. And you can become a god too, and that's the true form of Christianity. How does anyone get that? They get that by having another source of authority. Like Joseph Smith, when the prophet speaks as a prophet, then guess what? That's authoritative. And then the three works that I mentioned. That's how you end up with polytheism and becoming God as supposedly the true form of Christianity in the name of God. So that's the addition of Scripture. But you have to look at this, and we'll look later at some of these additions. So, for example, the Jehovah's Witnesses, at least officially, as one of the largest of the cults of Christianity. Again, they also claim about 15 million members, but they would say that the 66 books of the Bible are the only technically inspired books that they have. At least officially, that's what they say. And of course, their New World Translation is, as Dr. Walter Martin once called it, the late, great Walter Martin, the original Bible answer man. He said it was a portable ammunition dump for Watchtower theology. Why? Because you had a group of people who didn't know biblical Greek and Hebrew, and they went around changing the words in it to fit their Jehovah's Witness theology. Okay? So even though they say that that's their only inspired book. The fact is they got all sorts of other books that are published by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, put out by their governing authorities, that they follow as the official inspired, again, interpretations of the Bible. So even though not officially you've got extra scripture, functionally you've got extra scripture going on. And by the way, that goes on in our churches too. How many of you picked up a book from a Christian bookstore that someone recommended, and all of a sudden, your pastor or someone told you you should read it, and you follow it like it's scripture? You're not really judging what's being said there because it's a famous author or you heard them speak and they had a lot of charisma. Fact is, you got to be careful about that. That's how we end up constantly. We start out well in the church. False teachers come in, they say they believe what we believe, and they're lying, and then eventually they start changing and getting rid of the structures and the doctrine, and eventually you have something that doesn't look like Christianity anymore. And then we have to start all over with revivals, reformations, great awakenings, and so on and so forth. So be on guard, as Paul says, constantly. So anyway, in the next segment, we'll continue looking at more challenges to the scripture. While these are more objectively provable challenges in multiple sources, next we're going to look at some of the more subjective problems of what happens when someone improperly exegetes the text and interprets the text as a quote-unquote source of authority. See you next segment.